The sanctuary of men. The ancient Greek gymnasium wasn't just a place to train. It was where the real drama of the city played out. At sunrise, the space came alive. Dozens of young men arrived nude, their bodies slick with oil, ready to wrestle, run, debate, and be watched. This wasn't strange. It was expected. In fact, it was the point. The gymnasium was the heart of male life in Athens. Part school, part sports arena, part social club. But beneath all that, it was something else too, something no one openly admitted. It was a place of unspoken desire. Older men came not only to teach but to observe. Younger men came not only to train, but to impress. A look could mean everything. A touch during a wrestling match could say more than a speech. The Greeks believed that beauty inspired virtue, that admiration of the body could lead to refinement of the soul. So, if a man found a youth beautiful, that was fine, as long as he followed the unspoken codes. Don't act too eager. Don't speak too plainly. Keep it wrapped in philosophy. But everyone knew what was going on. Graffiti on the walls whispered names. Poems were carved in secret. Favors were traded. Jealousy simmered. Friendships turned into rivalries. Admiration could turn into possession. One boy, barely old enough to grow a beard, walks through the gymnasium for the first time. His body is changing. His name is being passed around. He feels eyes on him. He tries to ignore it. But in this space, being noticed means everything, and it never comes without a price. Love, power, and the body. There was no announcement, no permission asked. A man simply approached a boy, and the rest fell into place. It might begin during wrestling drills. The older man stands behind the youth, his hand guiding the curve of a back, fingers pressing gently into the ribcage. "Lower," he murmurs. "Breathe." The contact is instructional, at first, but the pressure lingers a moment too long. The pause says more than the correction. In the gymnasium, touch was constant, but meaning was always buried just beneath the surface. A boy oils his legs slowly, starting from the ankle, sliding his palm upward. Another watches from across the court, arms folded, eyes fixed. When the boy catches the gaze, he hesitates, but only for a moment. He continues. Slower now. These weren't accidents. These were performances. For some, it was a form of survival. Every gesture could signal belonging. Every look could offer protection or invite trouble. The older men watched from the shade, standing in the archways with one shoulder leaned against the stone. They spoke in soft tones, or not at all. Their presence was enough. When they stepped forward, boys moved aside, or toward them. A favorite might receive a new strigil, a seat at the edge of a lesson, a quiet nod in passing. These were gifts without names, symbols of proximity and influence. But once noticed, a boy was not free. He might be expected to walk with the man after training, to stay behind during cleanup, to listen, to obey. In the baths, silences deepened. A touch on the shoulder, a hand hovering just above the surface. Intentions were rarely spoken, but rarely missed. The city called it mentorship. But many understood the risks. Privilege came at a cost. To refuse admiration could mean exile. To accept it could blur the line between favor and control. Inside the gymnasium, the body was both shield and target. A boy could be beautiful, but not too eager. Modest, but not cold. The perfect balance was nearly impossible, and the cost of imbalance was high. Admiration, once given, came with expectations, and that kind of belonging was hard to undo. Whispers in the marble. The gymnasium was never quiet. Even when no one spoke, the walls seemed to hum with memory. Conversations that never happened. Glances that said too much. The stone held everything. It was a place designed for exposure. Open-air courtyards, wide columns, nothing to hide behind. But it also knew how to keep secrets. Shadows gathered in the recesses of the bathhouse. Alcoves along the portico offered just enough privacy. And in the pale light of morning, not every movement was seen clearly. Graffiti told the stories that voices wouldn't. Names were scratched into the marble with styluses or fingertips dipped in soot. Lycos is beautiful. Ariston is mine. Some were carved low near the ground, hidden unless you were seated, resting, watching closely. Others were bold, placed high on the walls like trophies. Love declarations, warnings, claims. A boy might find his name etched into the wall one morning. He wouldn't react, not openly, but he would walk differently. He would check to see who looked up when he passed. The message wasn't just for him, it was for everyone else. The bathhouse was where things went unsaid. A hand might brush against another beneath the surface. A knee might not move away. Steam softened outlines, blurred intentions. The oil clung to skin long after the water cooled. It was easy to forget yourself in the dim light and the warmth. That's why so many stayed late, long after training ended. But the gymnasium didn't forget. Every gesture left a trace. Every silence shaped the way others looked at you the next day. Reputation traveled quietly, from striggle to glance to rumor. The stone couldn't speak, but it remembered everything. And some memories, once carved in marble, never faded. The philosophers knew. They said the gymnasium trained both body and mind. The philosophers made sure of it. Socrates came often, not to wrestle, to watch, to question. He would lean against a column, arms folded, eyes sharp. When a boy finished his sprints, Socrates might call him over, not for praise, but for a riddle. What is courage? What is love? What is the good? The boy, still catching his breath, would answer carefully. He knew this wasn't just a game. To be challenged by a philosopher was an honor. But everyone knew Socrates had favorites. Plato wrote about it later. The kind of love that begins with the body but ascends toward the soul. He called it noble, divine, the highest form of affection. And in the gymnasium, those ideals took shape in real time. An older man tracing the curve of a shoulder while explaining balance. A tutor adjusting a youth's posture during a recitation. Instruction was constant. But so was touch. Desire was never named outright. It didn't need to be. It was woven into the way the philosophers spoke about beauty. The body as a reflection of harmony. The boy as a vessel of potential. And yet, not all admiration was equal. Some philosophers were accused of crossing lines, of favoring too openly, of turning mentorship into possession. Rumors reached the courts. A few names were tarnished. Socrates himself stood trial, not for touching, but for corrupting, for stirring thoughts that went too far. He denied nothing. He defended the power of love, but the message was clear. Even wisdom had limits in the eyes of the city. Even philosophy couldn't protect a man from how he looked at a boy. And in the gymnasium, the line between virtue and desire was never as clean as the marble beneath their feet. Fade to dust, rise as legend. The gymnasiums didn't fall all at once. Their decline was slow, almost invisible, until the stone floors no longer echoed with footsteps and the air no longer carried the sounds of training or laughter. As politics hardened and new moral codes took hold, the rituals that had once defined these spaces began to unravel. The unspoken connections between older and younger men, once framed as mentorship and virtue, were increasingly viewed through suspicion and fear. What was once admired became dangerous. What was once open turned secret, and then, finally, vanished. Now, only fragments remain. A cracked column in a field, a rusted strigil in the corner of a museum, a name, half scratched into marble, worn smooth by time. These ruins sit silently beneath the modern world, but they are not empty. They are full of memory. To walk through them is to feel the echo of something that was never fully spoken, something fragile, complicated, human. Because the gymnasium was more than a place of training. It was a stage where the body met the soul, where admiration was shaped into discipline and desire into silence. For every boy who stood taller under the gaze of an older man, there was another who learned to walk with his head down. For every bond formed, another was broken in quiet. And yet, the mark remains. Not in records or grand monuments, but in the softness of a carved shoulder, the curve of a half-buried oil flask, the deliberate silence of spaces that once buzzed with heat and hunger. We like to think we're different now, more modern, more honest, more free. But the gymnasium still lingers in our imagination. And if we truly listen to what the walls remember, how much of ourselves would we hear?